Assassin's Creed Mirage has one weirdly blustering defect to its gameplay, but is it really a weird blustering defect? Well, we're going to go over a couple of reasons as to why or why not this may be the case today. Now, without further ado, remember, if you do enjoy today's video, don't forget to leave it a big old like. If you enjoy content like this, you want more like it, be sure to check out that big red subscribe button right underneath the video. Also, got to thank my channel members. You guys help make these videos possible. Thank you so much for sticking around in my hiatus, those of you that did, and let's get right into the video. Now, real quick, and you can use timestamps if you want to skip this part. This one is for my followers who were wondering where I was because community posts only got to like 3 people for some reason. Thanks, YouTube. Essentially, a few months ago, I had an issue where my laptop that I make videos and play some of the games that I record footage of just straight up died. Now, if you're not familiar with laptops, they're not exactly fixable when the motherboard fries because they solder a lot of the pieces to the motherboard, and you might as well just buy a whole new one at that point. It's not worth really replacing. So it took me a while to save up the funds to get a new computer, and I decided to go a little bit all out and kind of future-proof myself. And instead of going with a laptop, I did go with a desktop. So I won't be able to make videos while I travel like I used to from time to time, but it's more reliable. I'll be able to have something that's a bit more consistent and not have to worry about, if something fails, go through this whole process again. Thankfully, a lot of my stuff was backed up and saved, so I have been able to transport a lot of things directly over to my new computer. But other than that, it's been quite a process over the past couple of months. That being said, let's just get right back into the video topic at hand. Now, the gameplay mechanic that I'm talking about is the speed teleport. You may be able to tell that from the very beginning of the video, but it's Basim's ability to teleport around. Now, there's a couple of things before you start typing in the comments. He's not actually teleporting, it's the Animus. Yes, we're going to talk about how they hit on 2 of the 3 pillars needed, but the key lies kind of in that 3rd pillar, and we're going to talk about. So 1, yes, the lore explanation makes sense. The Animus, which we experience all Assassin's Creed games through, is struggling to calculate the pun intended godlike speed that Basim has, and instead makes it seem as if he is teleporting around. Basim is not actually teleporting. He is not an Isu god, demigod thing like we had in Odyssey. It is simply the Animus struggling to interpret this. Now, I'm not sure if they've gone into whether or not the Animus is struggling with his DNA because he's a sage. I guess that would be something that they maybe could have explored in Valhalla then, because technically experiencing Eivor's memories, she was a sage, would have kind of been an issue, and so on and so forth. I don't know. It could be that. It may not be that. Who knows, honestly. Maybe because he was reanimated by the staff at the end of Valhalla, which, spoilers for Valhalla, which if you haven't made it to the end by now, you never will. But that's the kind of first pillar. They have the lore explanation down pat. I can accept the lore explanation, but then we move on to the second. In terms of gameplay, is this necessary? Is this something that is going to enhance the gameplay experience? Is it something that needed to be included? And honestly, I have to say, I think it's pretty justified in being included. I don't think it necessarily needed to be included. There's definitely a compelling argument that can be made for that, and I will semi-make that now, but I definitely think it is at least justified in being here. Because you have to look at the parkour mechanics. This game is coming off of the RPG games in terms of the build, the engine that it's on, the iteration of the engine that it's on. And so parkour in those games is pretty much push the stick forward and run, and the character pretty much does all the automation from there. You just kind of flowing in a straight line. There's no side ejects. There may be back ejects. You could kind of back eject in Valhalla. There just weren't a lot of places to actually do it. But back ejects aren't really as important as something like a side eject. Now, granted, the cities are made to facilitate more interesting parkour, be on rooftops, run around, things like that. And they have made up for it with different things such as the vaulting mechanic, being able to slide and slip over certain surfaces, little cool things like that. But what this does is it adds another element to that, because with the lack of traditional parkour to make movement around an area interesting, to have that quick ability to get from place to place like you do in other games, this adds a little bit more freedom of expression in terms of how you want to approach situations that not having the traditional parkour option sort of limits your ability to do. Without this, you would be far more limited in what you could accomplish moving around the city and how you want to stealthily and stylishly express your stealth and your ability to be an assassin. This adds to that. So again, I don't know if this is necessarily making the argument that it is needed in the game. I think I lean that direction just because there are limitations to movement, but I think it is more than justified in being in here from a gameplay perspective. Now, lastly, and probably one of the most important things, I mean, it's one of the 3 pillars. There's only 3 pillars right here. I mean, come on. The 3rd pillar is going to be pretty darn important. One thing they completely forgot with this is context and player expectations. Everything else in this game, from the marketing to the gameplay we've seen, trailers, the way it's talked about, everything like that, even though I know those last 2 things involve marketing, but whatever. This all screams classic Assassin's Creed. All of it. It all screams that. And when you see this for the first time, it is very clear how it could be very jarring to anyone that's expecting a traditional Assassin's Creed style experience. I know they're sort of balancing the new with the old. And even if you have that expectation where you know they're coming off of Valhalla's engine, this was originally supposed to be a Valhalla DLC. You know they're trying to get closer to that classic formula in this iteration of the engine. It's still jarring. You're like, what is that? Why are we teleporting? Because when you see it for the first time, you don't have the context of the lore. You don't have the context of what parkour mechanics there are. You don't have the context for that. And to have to stop and explain all that to someone to make it make sense just is kind of tedious and annoying. So I can 100% see the issue with it being the way that it is. Now, if it was something more similar to the fear takedowns in the Arkham games, or if it was more similar to the triple assassinations or double assassinations that you can do in Ghost of Tsushima, where again, Jin just kind of moves pretty quickly around an area and takes out the different enemies that are nearby. Granted, it's a little bit different, but still the idea is there, where it's more so based on quick movement that you see rather than what appears to be teleportation, which I know it's the Animus struggling to keep up with Basim's speed, but it's still just a weird, jarring thing to see on your screen when everything else in this game is screaming a completely different direction for where this game is going compared to what we had previously, where in Odyssey, where in Valhalla, not so much, even a teeny bit in Origins in a couple of spots. There's some abilities that you kind of had to suspend your disbelief. A few things are okay. Odyssey, especially, where you're just straight up a god, is like, okay, well, there's some just actual magical powers in here. This is a straight up fantasy RPG. This game is supposed to be going in the opposite direction. This game is supposed to be going back to the roots. And even though there's a few sequences, which I know some Odyssey fan is going to be like, well, actually, I loved the old games, and Ezio held the apple one time and did cool things. This is very different than Ezio holding the apple, okay? Him going around blasting everyone's brains out. That is a set piece in the story, and we have the context to that. To see Ezio walking around with that, well, if you played the first game and you saw what the apple did, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. And it's not something that just it can be activated at any time. Again, it's a set piece in the story. It's not something you can just whip out as you're wandering around Rome. It's a set piece. So very different. Again, it's not the worst thing in the world with the context of the game. I don't think it's awful. I don't think it's game breaking. I don't think it's going to ruin my personal playthrough of the game. I think it can add some interesting movement in terms of just enjoying the gameplay and being able to move around areas and approach situations in a different way. But it is pretty jarring of a mechanic, and I'm curious as to if it will throw off the feel of the gameplay in terms of just going around this traditional assassin manner, and then all of a sudden, hey, I just teleported to the top of this tower here and stabbed a guy. Is it going to have that kind of effect? I don't know. Time will tell. We'll find out. But let me know down below. What do you think of this teleportation Basim speed mechanic? Did it throw you off? Is it jarring for you? Do you not care? Do you think it looks really cool? Do you agree with me? Does it fulfill 2 of the 3 pillars for you? Does it fulfill all 3 pillars for you? Let me know down below. I would love to have a conversation with you. I'm so happy to be back, and I will see you in the next video, which is hopefully soon.